ham radio is not for preppers. Boy, that was a bold statement. So a couple of weeks ago, I posted a video called "Ham Radio is not for preppers," and I got a ton of comments. Some good and a fair amount of hate mail from ham radio operators telling me how I messed it all up and got it all wrong. So I wanted to make this recap video. I followed up on some suggestions that people made. I burned a couple of things, but I would like to respond to some comments. So let's get started. One of the comments that came up is I show a Baofeng in my thumbnail. And so, of course, if you have a Baofeng radio, you're not a real ham radio operator because these are like $25. Everything that I said in my video is absolutely true and is not equipment dependent. By the way, I'm a Yaesu guy. This is a VX7R that was about $300 that I've had for 12 years. So regardless of whether I hit a repeater with a $20 radio or a $300 radio is entirely not relevant. So anyone who says that I'm using crappy equipment and that's why I'm not succeeding, there you go. I also made a video almost a year ago showing my Yaesu 857. I've had an 817, an 857, and 897, which are all multi-$100 radios. So none of the things I discussed really are equipment dependent. They're just sort of based around the laws of physics that, you know, how radio waves work. Number one most frequently made comment is DMR. I missed all about DMR. So let's talk about DMR for a minute. So DMR is digital mobile radio. In these radios and regular Baofeng and anything else, these are analog, which means anybody with a scanner can pick them up. DMR is a digital signal, so if you pick it up on a Baofeng, it sounds kind of like fax noise. The Tech Prepper actually has a new video series on DMR. Pretty nifty. So the advantage to DMR, it's digital. It's not really encrypted, but it would be more difficult for the average person with a $20 Baofeng to pick up. So that's a little bit more secure, so that's good. But if you hit a DMR repeater, you can have multiple conversations flow through that repeater at once. So that solves my issue number one, which is traffic flowing through a repeater. When I made this statement that you can only have one conversation with an analog radio through an analog repeater at a time, people said, well, what about DMR? DMR, you can have multiple digital conversations flowing through a DMR repeater. Cool, absolutely true. Here's a couple caveats. Number one, Baofeng is $25. The least expensive DMR radio is the Anytone 878, which is between $300 and $350. So you have a 10x price increase over the beloved UV5R. A quick correction on this. In doing some research for the video, I did find other DMR radios that are less expensive than the 878. I found this here on Amazon for about $160. So that claims that it's DMR with GPS and APRS. So there are less expensive radio options out there, but they're still significantly more expensive than the beloved Baofeng UV5R. I did some research for the greater Austin area, and within 50 miles of my location in Austin, there are 100 analog repeaters, and there are 9 DMR repeaters. Within 75 miles, yeah. So they are not very common. So before you get really excited about switching to DMR, you might take a look and see if there's actually a DMR repeater in your area. Something else that was pointed out to me, it was my comment about battery backups. So I was not aware that on repeaterbook.com it actually shows what repeaters have emergency power and which ones do not. That is really nifty. I appreciated that comment. I was unaware of that. Interestingly enough, the two of the three primary repeaters in the Austin area, what I consider the big ones, don't have battery backup or don't have any sort of emergency power. And the units that do have emergency power are kind of out of the way and not as heavily trafficked. So I encourage anyone to go to repeaterbook.com and search for the repeaters in your area and see if they have battery backups. This is Repeater Book. You click on Emergency Power, and you can sort by location, and it will tell you what repeaters in your area have got backup power. While we're talking about repeaters, people have talked about GMRS. Okay, GMRS is essentially ham radio without a license on UHF. I mean, whatever. There are repeaters for GMRS, but they are even less common. Within 75 miles of my place in North Austin, there are four GMRS repeaters. So they do exist, but they are even less common than DMR repeaters. Okay? And while we're talking about licensing, I got a bunch of comments about how no one needs a license during the apocalypse and the FCC's not going to get me. I don't care. It's a debate that has raged on the internet for years. I am not a preachy ham. If you believe that you can buy a radio and just use it no matter what, and you don't care about the government or license, I don't care. I'm not telling you yes, no. That's a decision that you can make as a person. I don't care. I got no skin in that game. Hey, if you found this to be helpful and useful, drop me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Thanks. I would also like to respond to comments that were made comparing HF to satellite radio, which is what I recommended. It is an absolutely true statement that a satellite communicator, like I suggested, does rely on satellites working and does rely on ground stations. That is absolutely true. So it is absolutely true that if the satellites go out or the ground stations are out, that your satellite phone will not work. True. So if there's an EMP or a solar flare or a CME or anything else, global catastrophic, you are absolutely correct that your satellite phone will likely not work. I am not an end of the world prepper. I am not a doomsday prepper. So you can decide for yourself if you are. So it is also an absolutely true statement that HF radio really is the only way to have completely, totally self-contained communications that do not rely on the outside world. If you remember the movie Independence Day, the first one from '97, the end of the movie where they're using Morse code to talk around the world because all communications globally is knocked out, that's absolutely true. I absolutely agree with that. So if you are an end of the world prepper or you're really worried about EMPs, which are completely overrated, if you're really worried about EMPs or CMEs or solar flares, HF radio is absolutely the only completely self-contained way to communicate. I agree with that. What I'm really trying to get through with this video is that you've got to get out and try this stuff. You've got to practice. It's just like shooting a gun. You can't buy a gun and stick it in the closet and pull it out and think that you're a sniper. You got to try it. You've got to test it. I was part of a mutual assistance group a couple of years ago, and we were having a meeting to talk about ham radio stuff. and this guy pulled out a Yaesu 897, which is a really, really nice, very expensive, all band, all mode, do everything radio. They were about $900 at the time. He had never taken it out of the box, didn't have a power supply, didn't have an antenna, didn't have the foggiest notion of what to do with it. He just bought it because he read that it was the best radio and had not a single clue as to where to begin to use that thing. So having expensive equipment or having equipment at all is not going to do you any good unless you actually know how to use it. I also want to address something else that came up. Instead of repeaters, really the mode of communication that you are looking for is called SIMPLEX. That's just like the blister pack walkie-talkies from Walmart, where you have two radios that are talking directly to each other with no repeater in the middle. That's known as SIMPLEX. And it is essentially based as line of sight. So, you hear, oh, you get 30 miles on some FRS radios. Yeah, not really. I'll come back to that. So SIMPLEX is really where it's at, and that's where me and my wife practice, is with SIMPLEX. One of the greatest tools for a SIMPLEX radio is a roll-up J-pole, and I have other videos that I'll link to this. This is like less than $30, and it's like 15, 20 feet long, and I've got this little tail, and I put a piece of string through this with a fish weight, and I chuck it up in a tree. My personal record with this radio and this roll-up is over 30 miles. Caveat, in one instance, I was on top of a mountain. If you are from Austin, I was on Mount Bunnell, which is a mountain in Austin, and I talked to San Marcos, which is 35-something miles away. In my second instance, I was at a park called Inks Lake, and I had this thrown up in a tree, and I hit a repeater in Johnson City, which is 30 or 40 miles away. So long-range communication, direct communication, is possible if you have height, or if you have gain, or if you're out in the middle of nowhere. We happened to be at Inks Lake, and there was nothing around us, and I got some good height, and I was in a rural area, and I got some great connectivity. So having a good antenna will do wonders for you, but that's with direct connection. I also made a video several months ago about building your own repeater, building your own crossband repeater, which is legal. There are GMRS repeaters that other people have reviewed. I bought it because I had this master plan of hiding the repeater in the woods halfway between me and my friend's house, so that way we could have our own little private channel. So there are some capabilities out there and some fun stuff, but you gotta get out and try it. You gotta go and test these things and do it before the next emergency comes up. So to recap, buy good equipment, test your stuff. DMR has got some great capabilities if you're willing to spend the money on the equipment and that you have a DMR repeater nearby you, and it's got battery backup. So resources, repeaterbook.com, and the Tech Prepper, and Jason Canfor ACK, and I'll list those links below. So I hope this was helpful for you, and see you on the next one.